Hey folks, this is Fernando doing another video for Tomorrow Survival. Is finally my book review. This is Bugging Out and Relocating, my second book. Guys, there's gonna be another longer version of this video. It's a longer video. It's about 40 minutes, pretty long, but it's not just about reviewing the book. I also talk about other stuff. If you have the time, do take a look at it. This is gonna be a little bit of a shorter one if you're just interested in learning a little bit about what this book is about. Okay, so let's get started. This is my second book. My first book was this one, Surviving the Economic Collapse, the Modern Survival Manual. It did very, very well. I published it in 2009 based on my experience of living in Argentina through the economic collapse over there. More of a urban survival manual. What you do when things are getting pretty tough economically in terms of crime and such. In page 246, here we go, I wrote about relocating, and I said the following. Let me change their modes for a second. And this is the most valuable lesson people should learn, I said. When the conditions are no longer suitable and you don't just bug inside some bunker and mow down zombies in your front lawn. Your homestead won't be protected by some magical force shield. That doesn't happen. If crime is out of control, if there's a real risk of anarchy, it's better to leave the country. Throughout history, people have moved around, emigrated from one country to another for a number of reasons: war, famine, natural or man-made disasters, and political or religious persecution. On the other hand, there's millions throughout history that will always regret not bugging out of the country when they had the chance. They stayed and died. History is full of examples. It's the last resort you end up using when you see that things won't be getting better for a long time. As sad as leaving your home country may be, it's always easier to do when you prepare for it ahead of time. Okay, that's what I wrote in 2009 in the Modern Survival Manual, Surviving the Economic Collapse. In 2014, 5 years later, this is about doing just that. This is about preparing for when staying is not an option anymore. And this is basically a two-part book. It's divided in two parts. First part is about bugging out. Second part is about relocating. The first part is about bugging out because many times it may not be as drastic as having to leave your country entirely, or moving even out of your own state. But sometimes events such as personal financial disasters, house fires, forest fires like we've been seeing lately, floods, there's a number of reasons why you may have to leave your house in a short notice, or maybe a little bit more or less. I'm going to be getting into that in a second. But sometimes you just have to leave the place where you are. All right. Then you have the other part of the book, which is specifically about relocating, talking about different countries, even talking about states within the United States, and using some charts so as to see some of the best options and such. Let's get started so as to make this video actually shorter and not as long as the other one. Again, if you have the time, I recommend watching the other video. Pretty long, but lots of good food for thought in that one. The introduction, here basically I explain that this is a book I wrote about something I have done. There's lots of books written out there about preparedness, survival, bugging out, bug out bags, whatnot. People that have not done what they write about. I don't have a problem with that. Thing is that many times they're not even well researched. If you are going to be writing about something that you haven't done yourself, then it's important to do a lot of research. In this case, I've done a lot of research because I needed it myself, because I ended up doing exactly what I write about in this book. Okay, this is something that has worked for me. I have used this myself, so I can tell you that it does. It worked. It worked better than I could have possibly expected. Okay, introduction. Basically, that's what I go through. Bugging out, relocating, and bugging out abroad, making the difference and explaining a little bit this system of the two-part book. Bugging out, relocating, and that in-between thing, or that last resort, most desperate move, which is bugging out abroad, when staying in your country is not an option anymore. You have to leave your country entirely. Definition of bugging out, going through what the definition actually means, what bugging out actually means. When should you bug out? Possible scenarios. I explain a few of them here. Number of reasons why you may have to leave in more or less of a short notice. Selecting a bug out location, explaining what a bug out location actually is, guys. It's not always having a farm, a homestead fully stocked with animals. Sometimes people think that bugging out is about becoming a farmer in the end of the world. It never works that way. Bugging out is about having a place to go to when you just cannot stay where you are anymore. Also, important point about bugging out location, your bug out location is never where you already are. By definition, it cannot be your current home. Putting together a bug out plan, planning accordingly, having your family know exactly what to do, bugging out location and rally points, main routes and alternative routes, drill practice. You have to make sure you all know what you should be doing during a disaster, caches along the route, communications. Little tips, this is a system that I use in my first book as well, little tips here and there when I thought something was important. Bugging out timing when you have just 1 minute. There's a video I did about house fires, how in seconds a house can be engulfed in flames. 5 minutes, 1 hour. You don't always have the same amount of time depending on each individual case. Sometimes you have more or less time. You have to plan basically for all of them. Bug out bag. This is where I explain what you should have in a bug out bag. Many times you see these huge backpacks, more about wilderness survival, or actually more about camping and backpacking. That's got nothing to do with realistic bugging out. It has really no relationship with whatsoever. Camping is one thing, having a good weekend in a national park is one thing, an emergency, a disaster, that's something else. In this book I do have a little bit more pictures and such. I do go into detail a little bit on what you should actually keep, the contents of your bug out bag, more of a generic bug out bag of course, and explaining that you should be adapting it depending on your own needs and such. The documents bag, this is a bag where you have the essential documents, your passport, your cash, USB drive, spare keys, with a USB drive with some of your important files and documents, and whatever amount of some precious metals as well maybe. Okay, list of information to include, survival kits and caches, vehicle emergency kits. I do put the lists. I find that many of you guys find these lists useful for putting together your own survival kits and such. Bug out vehicle, explaining a little bit of my criteria: reliability, fuel efficiency. A Honda CR-V, Toyota RAV4. These two are two cars I really do like. More about having a vehicle that's rock solid, reliable, very reliable, and not really bad on gas, and limited amount of off-road capability. You don't need a huge 4x4 truck in general. Fuel efficiency, hybrid, electric vehicles, vehicle modifications. This would be like a Land Rover Defender, a nice off-road truck, but this isn't always what you need. Maybe in a location that you live pretty much off-grid and with very bad roads, you may end up having to use something like this, but in general I talk about more normal modifications, some of them that you may not have thought of, like safety window film, which is very useful in high crime areas. I learned that from Argentina. A good grill guard for pushing a vehicle out of the road and such. Other transportation, bugging out on foot. Bugging out on foot, look at all the people in different parts of the world right now, evacuating, becoming refugees, bugging out on foot. They have no other option. Sometimes that's what you're left with. Cardiovascular fitness, lots of times overlooked. People that focus on gear, on stuff, and not focusing on the main equipment that they have, which is their own bodies. Survival itself is pretty much about keeping yourself alive. If you're not taking care of your body, you won't be doing that. Heart rate, I basically explain some quick ways of assessing quickly your cardiovascular fitness level and see where you're at. Having a bug out abroad contingency plan. Okay, this is a very YMCA 3-minute step test, a quick test so as to decide, so as to see how good your fitness level is. The importance of a second passport. Second passport is probably the most useful, most valuable tool you could have in a worst case scenario. You have the ability of landing in another country when you have to evacuate your own and land in it as a citizen. That's priceless, believe me. How much money do you need? Well, about the passport thing, many times you guys have the option of getting a second passport because of ancestry. In Ireland, in India, there's many countries. Go through your family history, your family tree. There's probably someone that you could have a claim of citizenship of some country, and you're not taking advantage of that. Big mistake. How much money you need, bugging out, and precious metals, how useful precious metals can be, patriotism and bugging out abroad. Sometimes people feel that leaving your country is against their patriotic duty. I explained that it may not always be that the case, that sometimes it's actually about putting your family in a safe place first and then deciding what to do. At least you have options, and it's always good to have those. Part 2 about relocating. Making up your mind about relocating. When should you relocate and bug out abroad? That's kind of a hard call to make, but I try to explain a little bit why and how you would be doing that. At least have an idea of where to draw the line and say, okay, now we have to leave. This isn't working for us anymore. Where should I go? You know, the big question. Best quality of life. These are all statistics that are available online and such, but many times overlooked when people talk about countries to evacuate to or relocate to. People think of exotic places instead of thinking of normal quality of life, good countries. Australia, Austria, Canada, Finland, New Zealand, countries that always rank very well in terms of quality of life. Human Development Index, all these charts will help you decide in what country would be a good option for you. Corruption Perception Index, very important so as to cross-reference with other information that you have from different countries. Pearson Global Skills and Education Ranking, looking at the quality of education in different countries. And this is, guys, something that you would be using no matter what country you're considering. These charts will give you an idea of, I don't know, you're considering Portugal. Okay, how good is quality of life in Portugal? The Human Development Index will give you a basic idea of that. Same with all the other information and the other charts. Whatever country you're thinking about, these charts will help you make an objective, cold-headed decision about that. Corruption percentage is so important. I mean, a country with high percentage of corruption, you know, many times, look at this, people so many times talk about Panama, the best place to bug out to, or I'm relocating to Panama because I want to be free. You're going to Panama because you want to be free, a place that's as corrupt as Jamaica? You're insane, you just don't know what you're talking about. Education, important for those of us that have kids. Freedom in each country. How important is it to be free in this country you're relocating to? I at least consider it to be very, very important. Freedom in each country. Take a look at Argentina, and in this case you have several indexes and such. Freedom in the world, 2014 economic freedom. Press freedom, very important. This is something that I took very seriously when leaving Argentina. The problem with lack of freedom of press in Argentina, at least to me, helped me decide to leave. Argentina, in terms of freedom in the world, 2014, free. In terms of economic freedom, it is repressed. And in terms of freedom of press, noticeable problems. That's something to keep in mind. That's a red flag to notice. Okay. Changing modes there, back, trying to go through this as fast as possible, but I really packed, doesn't seem like that, but I packed a lot of information in this book. Farmers' ownership per capita in each country. You don't have freedom if you don't have the right to be armed, right? I at least think that the quality of gun laws that you have in a country says a lot about how free you really are in those places, all right? Looking at some of the most armed countries in the world and looking at some of the least armed countries of the world. Most armed: United States, Serbia, Yemen, Switzerland, Cyprus, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Uruguay. But look at Sweden, Norway, France, Canada, Austria, Germany, Iceland. These are all the most armed countries in the world. The least armed countries in the world are Honduras, Tunisia, Bulgaria, Solomon, Ghana, I mean Ethiopia, countries you really wouldn't want to be in. Homicide rate by country gives you an idea basically of how bad the situation is in that specific country, but you have to cross-reference that with corruption percentage indexes as well. Consideration when choosing a country: crime, unemployment, corruption, medical care, climate, all these considerations, cost of living, education, disasters, personal considerations when relocating. Many times it's about what you want and your own circumstances, how old you are, your background, what you're expecting, what life you want for yourself. Even your ethnic, religious background, you don't want to be in a place where you're not going to be assimilating, or you're going to be maybe even discriminated against. Relocating to Latin America, I cover some of the fantasy of this idea of moving to a tropical paradise in a third world country. Never works as well as people think it will. Recommended countries. Basically, the first one, United States. I still think it's the best country to live in. And within the United States, I use some of the information so as to look at the different states, cost of living in different states, so as to decide of maybe relocating within the United States. All these charts will help you decide that. Crime by state as well. This I got from the FBI website. They have some chart that I cleaned up a little bit. A murder, violent crime rate, robbery, assault, burglary by state. All these will help you decide where you're going to be going. Education, ACT scores by state as well. Basically, this gives you an idea of what you're looking at, not only relocating within your country, relocating abroad as well. The same criteria is used in terms of what's important or should be taken into account. Firearms laws, citizenship and immigration. Well, the states I at least like myself, Texas, Colorado, New Hampshire, Utah, Oregon, Virginia, Nebraska, other states. Basically, guys, I'm saying that in pretty much any state of the United States has the advantage of almost each state being like a little country in its own right. Pretty much in any state of the United States, you can make a good, you can find a place where most of your needs would be covered. In pretty much all states, you have probably a good place to live in. Some states are, of course, better than others, and especially in terms of law, some states have pretty bad gun laws and such. But the United States is pretty big, and you have lots of good options. It's not always that you have to move to Idaho, like the only place where people should be living in the United States. Not by a long shot. Canada, my second option in terms of some of the best countries to live in. Canada is very good as well. I think it has a lot going for it. Australia. The only problem with Australia is pretty far away from everything else, but does pretty well in most other things. Gun laws are not that good. I go into that quite a bit. It's explaining gun laws in Australia. Pretty much give a quick view of that specific country, so as to give you a first look and see if that appeals to you or not. Republic of Ireland. Ireland is basically the island of Ireland. Then within Ireland you have Republic of Ireland, and you have Northern Ireland, which is part of UK, which is you have the advantage of being able pretty much to choose depending on what you want. Lots of people move back and forth depending on work, what they're studying, what university you're going to, and such. Ireland is in general, I think, a pretty good option within Europe, and I go through that myself explain. New Zealand, great place to live, excellent quality of life, and great gun laws as well. Has a lot going for it, New Zealand. Only problem is that it's pretty far away and earthquakes. Oriental Republic of Uruguay. Uruguay would be my choice in Latin America. Not my first choice by any means, but so many people ask so much about Uruguay, that's why I included it as well. Maybe if something is affecting the Northern Hemisphere and you have to go for something in the Southern Hemisphere, other countries, country selection, detailed research, how to carefully research the country, the city, specifically what you think you're going for, make a more detailed research so as to make a final decision. Making up your mind about living in the city, country, or suburbs, the advantages and disadvantages of each, before buying and renting. This will help you and save you a lot of grief if you follow some of this advice. I know it did it for me. It helped me a lot doing all these things that I read about here, before, during, and after leaving. Some of the things to do. The tough choice, the toughest choice, you know, deciding to leave everything behind. Not easy. My wife on relocating. I asked my wife a few basic questions to see her perspective, her point of view, so as to have someone else's opinion. And I think it's interesting. I always like having that extra perspective of things. And my wife, she's a pretty smart lady, and I'm sure you guys would like to see what she has to say. And basically that's that. Annotations and some of the bug out locations, so I have to write them down. And that's it, guys. This is Bugging Out and Relocating. The link is going to be there below for Amazon, and you can read also the reviews in Amazon that the book has, and of course this other one as well, the Modern Survival Manual, Surviving the Economic Collapse. Link to those down there in the descriptions, and read the comments of what other people in the reviews, what other people had to say. I'm pretty sure it would be of use, and these two together provide that combo of bugging in and what to do when you cannot stay there anymore. Available in Kindle, paperback as well. Thumbs up if you liked it, and guys, if you have read it and liked either one, I would really appreciate a 5-star review. It always helps a lot, so I really do appreciate your support in that as well. Folks, take care, and remember to watch the longer version where I talk about other stuff as well. Take care, have a great day, see you on our next video, folks.